Hi, I'm Harriet Frew, eating disorder therapist, teacher and podcaster, and you're about to start healing from your eating disorder and transforming your life and your relationship with food and body. I've worked in NHS and private practice supporting clients for 20 years, and I believe that recovery is possible for you. This podcast dives into expert interviews, evidence-based psychological approaches, and anecdotal tips from the therapy room from my years of experience. If you're wanting to heal your relationship with food, feel confident in your body, develop self-love and self-acceptance, and create a life of freedom and meaning, then this podcast is for you. Thank you for being here. Today I have a guest on the show, and I'm talking to Flurina Thali, who is an osteopath, coach, lecturer, researcher, dancer, artist, and host of the podcast, The Breathing Body. She is also someone who suffered from an eating disorder for many years and found healing through movement, body awareness, and rediscovering the fascination and miracle our bodies express every day. Flurina calls this the sweet song of feelings and emotions. Flurina initially trained as a dancer in Denmark and the Netherlands. During this time, she encountered many somatic practices, in particular the Alexander Technique and Ideokinesis, which continuously taught her as a facilitator the art of creating space and finding ease in movement by using images and imaginations. Flurina gained a master's degree at the European School of Osteopathy, and she is currently practicing in private clinics in Kent and London, as well as working for the Osteopathic Centre for Children in London. Inspired by her own journey, Flurina has created various platforms to support women recovering from eating difficulties and living a life beyond their wildest dreams. In the episode today, Flurina talks about her eating disorder recovery journey, delving into finding reconnection with her body and trusting its innate wisdom and intuition. She also talks about how she supports her clients today through women's circles and one-to-one work. Flurina has incredible energy and presence in this conversation, and I know that this will really inspire you. Let's get to it. Time for a short advertisement break. Are you a counsellor, dietitian, therapist, nutritionist, personal trainer, or other mental health professional? Are you seeing increasing numbers of your clients struggling with eating disorders and disordered eating? And are you keen to learn skills and strategies and build confidence in working with your clients who struggle with these issues? We know that increasing numbers of people are struggling with eating disorders, and we know that 85% of people with eating disorders are not underweight, and this means that many eating disorder symptoms are hidden. The Good Childhood Report in 2021 highlights appearance as a leading cause of unhappiness among young people and indicates that appearance concerns are increasing year upon year. So join my Eating Disorders Training Day on Zoom, face-to-face or self-paced online. It will give you a really good understanding about the different types of eating disorders, including anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, and OSFED, with an introduction to RFED and neurodiversity and eating disorders. You'll explore typical causes of eating disorders and understand how to create a psychological formulation for your client, and this will be brought to you by relating to client examples. I will take you through then my specific knowledge, skills and techniques, which can be used when supporting clients with eating disorders. You will get a full comprehensive training manual and access to the recording of the training afterwards and a full online version of the course. If you want to sign up, please go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk, and you might also be interested in my body image training for professionals too. Hi, Flurina. Welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast.
Hello, Harriet. Thank you.
Well, really good to see you today, because it feels like quite a long time actually from when we first made contact about you coming on the show.
Absolutely. In winter, I believe. Yeah, good to be here.
Oh, okay. So Flurina, I know you're going to come on today and just talk a little bit about your recovery story and some of the work you do.
Mm-hmm.
But for anyone that doesn't know you, could you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yes. Absolutely. So, well, I say yes so easy, and actually it's always a bit tricky how to best introduce myself. I'm Flurina. I'm 30 years old. I love this year of turning 30. That's why I always say that. That was such an exciting year. I'm originally from Switzerland. You might hear that. My German accent will always be very strong, and I'm not trying hard to hide it. And I came to the UK 7 years ago to study osteopathy. My very background has always been in movement and dance and everything creative and expressive. But then that dance career took a turn, which had lots to do with the eating disorder, or with that journey. I then studied osteopathy, and at the moment I'm living in London, in Southeast London. That's where I'm based, and I practice as an osteopath, particularly a lot with children as a pediatric osteopath. I work with women with eating, food struggle stories, but also with women without. And yeah, just follow my own projects, my very creative voice, which I'm sure we'll talk about that more. It's very much part of my story.
Definitely would like to get into that a bit, because it feels like today, obviously, is the first time I've met you and experiencing you, but you seem to have a very joyful energy, and it's really nice, sort of bubbling over. And yeah, I'm just wondering, do you think you've always had that from when you were a little girl?
That is so wonderful. That's what you feel right in the beginning, or that's what comes across. Yes, absolutely. I think bubbly is a good expression. It was always bubbling in me. And I've always been, joyful and very optimistic. And I think that's exactly a gift to work in that field, right? Because what I learned, or I'm learning in my recovery coach training, and obviously, I witnessed that recovery is possible. It is possible to fully recover. I'm very glad that my nature is probably joyful part. Yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think it's very nice to be on the receiving end of your energy. So that's some nice feedback for you. So, Flurina, can you tell us a bit about your story? I know that you were a dancer, weren't you? And I'll let you tell us what is relevant, I guess, for the listeners.
Yeah, I think when I look back, what still and over again really strikes me is the beginning of my eating story journey. I started to call it not eating disorder, but just my eating story, because that sounds more potent to me. And there was literally one day when I turned 11. I was 11 years old, and I remember so well, Harriet. I was walking, it was lunch break, morning break at the primary school I went to at that moment in time. It was sunny outside. I was walking over the schoolyard, and I suddenly had that, not even a thought, a very strong voice. And that voice said, if I would be thinner, life would be easier and I would be happier. And I was 11 years old at that moment in time. I didn't even know what an eating disorder was. I had no clue about mental health and anything. But that voice, it somehow grew. I think it started growing in me as I started school. In my first time of school, that was poof, a different wind was blowing, as they say in German. I grew up in a bubble of love. Here's the bubble again, in a very loving family. And when I went to school, I noticed, poof, suddenly that's what it was, Harriet. There was a concept of right and wrong. I grew up with, there wasn't a concept of right or wrong. We would just explore or try out or slightly deviate or modify in my family. Bless my parents. But suddenly there was right or wrong, and kind of not so much in between. I think that meeting that concept grew in me until there was just this voice. If for some reason, if I would be thinner, life would be easier and I would be happier. That was when I was 11 years old. Here she was, 11 years old, and I thought, oh yeah. And that was the start of then almost 17 years with falls forwards and backwards, but 17 years of definitely constantly dealing, planning, thinking, doing things all about how can I possibly control what I eat or control how I look like, in that desperate hope to feel better. But the point was I would just feel worse and worse and worse. I said a lot now. Little break.
Yeah, so really interesting actually that you were, just 11, which is very young, isn't it, to be having those thoughts. But I think really interesting how you noticed the difference between your family of origin, where it sounds where it did suit your nature more in terms of, being more kind of curious and exploring and discussing, and sounded like quite an accepting environment, possibly being in school where it's much more kind of right and wrong. That felt really quite difficult. Makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I jump a bit between future and past, looking back in time, right? Because the key thing in my recovery and in the work I do now is that balance between the masculine and the feminine. Dr. Anita Johnston, Eating in the Light of the Moon. Thank you, Anita. And if I look back in time, right, the body in itself is a feminine principle. And we are a society, not maybe less now than 30 years ago, but we grew up in a patriarchy. And I think looking back during my childhood or these early years, the feminine, the body, everything which comes from it, the poetic, the story, the metaphor, the intuitive, the instincts, all of that got really nurtured. And suddenly I was in this environment where, and I'm talking about archetypes, not gender, but where the masculine was all what counted, the logical, the linear, the analytical. So I think that's why suddenly part of me thought I need to come up with a very analytical way of, in the end, of loving myself, right? That's what it was about. I came to school and I got mobbed. I was a kind of outsider. I didn't feel loved. So that eating disorder or eating story was a desperate attempt to find a way to possibly love myself.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. So what happened with dance then? Were you dancing pre-11 as something you've done from a very young age?
Yeah, you asked the right question. So that's the other thing which strikes me over and over again when I think about my story. With 11, I started to push that body away, and also that very emerging feminine body, right? It was the year I had my first menstruation. So interesting looking back in time. And also it was the year in which I really clearly started saying to my parents, I want to be a dancer. I've always wanted to be an actress or a singer or a circus acrobat. And with 11, it was a dancer. And it was almost, I wanted it, but I almost had no choice, which is the interesting thing. I kept saying to my mom, and it's crazy, I kept saying, I just have to dance. And she would say, but it's going to be hard and blah. And I wouldn't listen. I just had to dance. So there was this paradoxical relationship right from the beginning. On one level, I pushed that body away, but on the other level, I wanted to explore it in all its depth. And that then became very much the theme of my life for all those 17 years. That almost the more I would push it away, the more I wanted to immerse myself into my body and into studying it. So I did grammar school in Switzerland. I couldn't choose dance as a main subject, so I chose the violin. That was the most expressive subject. But when I finished, that was when I was 19, I kind of threw the violin a little bit into a corner and finally I could dance. And then I went to Copenhagen to train in my first year, which again was a paradoxical moment because on one level I could finally just dance, but at that time still very much with my eating disorder self. That voice was really relieved that finally no one is telling me what to eat. I can just control and restrict as much as I want. So I was in Copenhagen and it was, a love-hate relationship. I wanted to move, but it was very tough. And it was obviously very tough to keep delivering when you don't physically have enough energy. And after that 1 year, that was like a kind of prep year where they would prepare you for all the auditions. And then I got accepted in a school in Holland where I always wanted to go. And I went there. And it was pretty much towards the end of the first year where I literally danced myself into a black corner until literally I would go all the way to the studio, open the door, there would, I don't know, ballet class or be something, and I just couldn't step into it. That eating disorder voice, or just that voice of I'm not good enough, I can't do this, was so strong that I couldn't even take that step in the studio. And I think that was probably the peak of my story, or of the story where the eating disorder self was very active. And it was a really painful moment. And my mom came and she took me back home, and I knew that something has to change. But also it was a great moment, right? I thought I failed completely, but it was the beginning of something amazing. So looking back, I think, it was a really, really potent moment.
Time for a short advertisement break. I want to tell you about Mindy Gorman-Plutzer. She is a board-certified integrative health coach, certified eating psychology coach, and certified functional nutrition counsellor. In 2012, she created the Freedom Promise in an effort to help clients transform their relationship with food from one mired in fear and confusion to one that is loving, nourishing, and sustainable. Inspired by her own recovery journey, she developed a signature system comprised of 7 steps.
The framework offers an alternative approach to recovery as it's aligned with the principles of functional medicine. All systems are connected, everybody is unique, and everything matters. She guides you to listen to the wisdom of your body so you discover an empowering nutrition and lifestyle protocol that speaks to your unique needs. If you hunger for food freedom, Mindy invites you to a complimentary discovery session. During this powerfully eye-opening conversation, you'll explore the steps that will help you transform the energy of obsession to making lasting and sustainable changes in your life, including your relationship with food and your body. If you're seeking freedom from a relationship with food that's holding you hostage, if you're longing to find your enough, if you're feeling inspired by the possibilities that await you when you create the life you deserve and desire, contact Mindy today. The link to do so is in today's show notes. And I think, so interesting actually about those different paradoxes along the way, because I'm sure many of the listeners will relate to that. And it sounds like such a lot of conflict for you. I think even just like meeting you for a few minutes now, I get a very strong sense of someone who is naturally very intuitive and creative and expressive. And the eating disorder was the real opposite of that, wasn't it? Kind of very rigid and controlling and so that real kind of push-pull.
Absolutely. And I'm sure many listeners can relate to that too, right? It's also that tendency to all or nothing. I know that so well from myself. And I know that that is a theme with us eating disorder recoverers and warriors. And also that theme of sensitivity, of being so strong on one level, but actually so fragile and sensitive underneath. And not meaning that there isn't strength exactly in that fragile part. And that's what I started to experience or to uncover when I left Holland. How can I find the strength in that so sensitive part?
So tell us a bit more about that. Like, it sounds like you hit rock bottom, but then, although that was a very dark time, it was actually the beginning of good things.
When I came back from Holland, I think one key, again, a thing which really strikes me, and I share that because I hope that exactly that encourages many, many, many people out there. I started trying out this therapist and that. We made plans and protocols, etc., etc. And it was quite difficult for the first couple of months until my mom, I think she thought, what love shall I do with you? Until she said, okay, Flurina, so tell me, what do you need? Then just tell me, what do you need? If this isn't working, and then tell me what you need. And I still hear her asking that. And I said, Mom, I need to go to the mountains. And here she said at work, I can't come to work for 2 weeks. We packed our things. I was in Switzerland and we went to the mountains. And we didn't even stay. I only stayed 2 or 3 weeks in the mountains. But that was the question which was missing in my life. Flurina, what do you need? And it still touches me very deeply. I spent these 17 years completely forgetting that the most potent thing I'm here to do, I'm meant to do, is to ask Flurina, what do you need? I didn't even have to think about. I knew in that very moment that just the next step would be to go to the mountains. And then the next step came and then things started to unfold. And I think that's the first thing I really want to share with listeners. And that's so much what I do in my work, to trust that our bodies, sometimes we don't know what happens in 3 days or in 2 or in a month or how I can actually get recovered. I was still pretty desperate then, but I knew the momentarily next step. And that's the moment when I started calling my body her, she just knew it. And that's the feminine, right, Harriet? That's the intuitive, instinctual. So that was a key moment.
Oh, it sounds it. And gosh, I guess incredible actually, like that your mum was able to be very attuned to you and was prepared to listen. I mean, it gave me kind of goosebumps listening to it actually. But I think that was a very, very powerful moment, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Where you connected with yourself again.
Yes. I connected with myself, and I remember she asked, I said, and I burst into tears, into big, loud, good tears. And my mom burst into tears. And I still feel that pain, and I feel the gift in that pain. And I know that can be so triggering, but it's so good to just give that an expressive voice. And that's the other thing I hugely encourage in my work, to really give that a voice. Feelings are meant to be felt, and I just kind of archive them, but feelings aren't meant to be archived.
And I love your intuitive response about the mountains, because it wasn't like a big analytical exercise, was it, of like thinking the pros and cons of each choice? It was very much just like that's what you needed, and that's what came to you.
That's what I needed, yes.
So tell us a little bit more then about, I'm keen to hear about the work you do with your clients. Well, I know we're going to get a little bit on that, but tell us a little bit, like a summarized version of the end of your story, like from the mountains to
I can give you it sounds all so poetic, but that's just literally how it was. We are all poetic beings. We are story creatures. That's also part of my work. So here I was in the mountains, and that's the other thing I remember. I was sitting, it was spring, we arrived, and I literally ran up that mountain. It was the highest mountains, the place where my name comes from, Flurina. And it was a big field with wild orchids. The only place where I find wild orchids in Switzerland is the high mountains in spring. And I was just lying, I just literally surrendered into Mother Earth. And these were the weeks when I then started to realize, and that was the end of my recovery journey, the beginning of the recovered life, whatever you call it. But I realized, okay, I've quit that dancing training. One part of me thought I failed. And I really asked myself, so, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to recover into? And that is key of the work I do now today. I'm really interested in hearing, what does she want to recover into? I reconnected back to all those visions and dreams I have, and I had, and I knew I always had. And I very clearly realized, being in the mountains, if I want to go forward for those dreams and visions, and I know we all have those, and we are meant to go forward for those, I knew that I need all of myself on board, right? Because so far it was constantly, I would do that great thing for a project, and then my eating disorder pulled me right back, and I ended up a crying, desperate pile of something. And I went again, and I collapsed again, and then collapsed. And I noticed, okay, if I want to give expression to that creativity in me, then I need her. And I don't just need a healthy weight and enough hair and all of that. No, but I need her as a tool to know what is yes, what is no. And I think that's when I then really made a commitment. I recover not because people tell me it's good for me and because then I have a healthy weight. I recover because I'm meant to live my dreams. And sometimes I think myself, that sounds a bit poetic. One of my slogans is to live a life beyond your wildest dreams. And then I think, no, it's not poetic, because that's what I'm doing now. And there we go back to the society, into the patriarchy we're living in now, Harriet. The world needs all us women struggling with food and eating disorders, because it's about uncovering the feminine. And I mean, look into the world. That's what it needs. That's what we need. It needs us. Yeah, I think that's a summarized end of what happened there. And there were still many years of therapy and working on things and stuff, but I didn't have these major fallbacks, or I didn't doubt the recovery anymore, because I knew exactly why I wanted to recover.
Yeah, and that's really powerful hearing that. And I think I'm just so with you. Like, I think when we can really kind of commit to recovery and wanting to be our like fully flourishing self and to live our dreams and all of that, I mean, that is something to get excited about, isn't it? If we're thinking about like, let's put on weight because someone's told me to and I've got to eat the next meal,
it's not going to work.
It's not going to work. It's got to be something bigger and something that really lights us up and gives us purpose.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, absolutely. All these years you lied to any nutritionist. You can become the best controller of the controlling, but it's not about that. It's about reclaiming your body for more than just its weight, right? It's to reclaim your body as the vessel for your creative voice. That's what I feel so strongly today. And the wonderful thing is, that's what feels so light, Harriet. I was one of those anorexic people always saying, I need to feel light. I want to feel light. And the lighter I felt and blah, blah. It was all about lightness. And when I find myself today again thinking, oh, I need to feel light, there is one question I ask myself, and it's what makes me feel alive? What would make me feel alive today in this next half an hour? And it might be actually some dancing or yoga or meeting a friend, whatever it is. But it's within the aliveness where the lightness lies, which I had to discover.
So tell us a little bit more about the work that you do with your clients.
Yeah, the beautiful story there is that all things then just started to fall into place. I moved to the UK. I studied osteopathy because I still wanted to study the body in all its depth. Did bits and bobs of other courses and started to practice as an osteopath. And I just seemed to, of course, because that's what I put out energetically, I just started to attract women with eating body stories and struggles. And first I started just kind of coach or work with friends, and until I realized, especially last, I don't know, 4 years or so, 3-4 years, I noticed, wow, of course, that's my calling, that's my path, that's what I lived through, and therefore it's just not a question. That's what I have to do. On one level, I started to do several things. On one level, I also made a podcast, The Breathing Body, because, I feel my recovery journey is the constant uncovery of the breathing body, of that body who is very much in touch and knows and tells us. So I created a podcast. I run local women's circle, teaching yoga, and started to coach women mainly online because people are from all over the place, some from Switzerland. Then decided, because that's my personal opinion, right? We are in this age where just everyone can call themselves a coach, and their coach is flowing around and floating around, which I personally sometimes also find a bit dangerous because, yes, eating disorder, it's a thing. So I decided to start to train as a certified eating disorder coach with the Caroline Costin Institute. You might hear about that. I've heard about that.
Yeah.
As I'm continuing to work. So what do? I work 1-to-1, usually over a period of 3 months. It usually happens that I think that's the most beautiful, and it always happens that there are 3 or 4 or 5 or a couple of women coming at the same time. And then we journey individually, but also as a group with having sessions all together. And that's what I very much experience if holding or attending women's circles, right? When women gather and when we just so raw and pure share, and that's where healing happens, or that is the creative process. And I very much work with through conversation, but through movement, through guided meditation, through many different medias. But I'm really interested in what does this individual person need to give the body a voice. And for some, it is through movement. From others, it's through journaling. I use a lot of journaling and writing diary, just writing. From others, it's drawing. And also figuring out together that question, what is the life I want to recover into? Really give those dreams and visions an actual physical voice and shape. And I guess figuring out together how to trust, how to use the body as that tool to always tell me the next teeny tiny steps, and then how to actually go and do them.
Yeah, no, sure. So it sounds like a very intuitive process, I guess, doesn't it? Really getting back in touch with the body, but very individualized as well in terms of, like you've said, some people prefer to journal or to draw or to move, and you're helping people to find their thing.
Absolutely. That could be a whole other thing. A big carb or the continuity, I do work at the moment primarily with women, that's what I've been drawn to, is the constant, is menstrual cycle awareness. That's what I use hugely. That's what kept me recovered. That's what it was in my recovery. It was crucial, right? I'm not sure how much time we still have. I should go into that. But when I recovered, I noticed, okay, that eating disorder self, bring it right to the point, that eating disorder self, or that voice, what is it really? It really is that part which gives me information, right? Which tells me when something is wrong, which tells me when there is a feeling, an emotion, which actually wants to be uncovered, wants to be spoken out. Or it tells me if there is a desire or a need and I'm not listening to. And if I learn how I can respond to that without actually using my behaviors, then that is wow. And the guide or the container which held that for me was menstrual cycle awareness, because the more I got in touch with my female body, I noticed, interesting, it really is a cyclical body. I didn't have my period for many years during the eating disorder, but got it back. And just with knowing, where am I? In menstrual cycle awareness, there is this concept about 4 seasons: in your spring, in your summer, your autumn, your winter. You have different needs and you have different skills and gifts. And if we can connect with that in various different areas or questions of life, and it's just such a wonderful container or guide or constant, because it's just always there. It is our nature.
Yeah, for sure. That is such an interesting topic, isn't it? And maybe that is something that you can come back at some point and talk about even more, which would be great.
Yeah. I just feel that might deserve a whole and whole.
So, Flurina, if people want to work with you or find you, where can they get in touch? Where's the best place to seek you out?
I think the best place are 2 channels. One is my webpage, flurinathali.com. You can put it in the show notes, but with webpage, I feel that I renewed that in the summer, but it actually needs updating again. The other good place is Instagram, Flurina_breathing_body. I enjoy inspiring and sharing there. I think with all its negative sides, social media is also fantastic to have these profiles. And that's a good place. That's probably where I'm sharing the most accurate or the most newest things, but equally on my webpage.
Sure.
Or just drop me an email or
and your podcast as well.
And my podcast, absolutely, which is also about eating disorder recovery, but not purely. I just want to create an archive for women, but not just women, men, people out there, to hear from various practitioners how they connect meat, nurture, body. There are some more episodes about menstrual cycle awareness for the ones who now think,
would like to hear more.
What is that? What is that all about?
So, Flurina, as well, do you have any kind of final words for the listeners that you'd like to leave them with? Do you think anything that you want to mention?
What are my final words? I think when you ask that, I immediately hear or see these listeners who are in that moment, that place of desperation, and just knowing of where the only thing you can hear is, wow, how can ever anyone help me, and how can I ever recover? Because I know that place very well, and I was there, and it's so painful. And I think my message is especially somehow for that situation. And I just want to say, you can, and I know that you can. And I want to say that there is still so much more windows and help and tools out there which you might just not quite know yet, because that's what I experience. And I encourage you to trust to this one teeny tiny next step you feel is the next step you take, even if it's just that one phone call or that one class or that book, or finally cut your hair or get that rest, how teeny tiny it is. That was my final word. To really trust your body.
I think so helpful, and just a great reminder, isn't it? It's just the next little step. That's all you got to think about.
Yes, right. Recovery is not linear, and it doesn't have to be. Our body isn't linear either. So how could it? And baby steps.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Flurina. It's been really
Harriet.
Great.
Thank you.
Great talking to you. And I'm sure everyone's going to be so encouraged by the conversation. And thank you for sharing your story and about some of the work you do.
Thank you so much for your time.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation just as much as I did, and do go and check out Flurina's details in the show notes. If you're not following me already on Instagram, do seek me out, the Eating Disorder Therapist _. And for further support with your relationship with food, do go to the eatingdisordertherapist.co.uk. If you enjoy this podcast, I will be so grateful if you'd follow, rate and review, as it helps it reach so many more listeners. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.